best advice if you're trying to stay sober, because their heads are toiled out there. I got to do this. I got to do that. There's so many things that they believe that they have to do. And I was told early on, if I didn't put my sobriety first, everything else would come last. And so that's what I say. Make a meeting. First thing you get out of those doors, because the women that I take meetings into the jail, they're going to get out. And that's the first thing that I say to them, get to a meeting first off, because, and then things will help, kind of smooth out. When your sobriety comes first, everything else falls into place. That's been my experience.
I heard it through the grapevine.
Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine half-hour variety hour featuring the collected voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Don, an alcoholic in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Donnie! Hey, everybody, I'm Sam, an alcoholic in Palm Springs, California.
Hiya, Sam. My higher power's at work.
Your higher power's at work?
My higher power's at work, a power greater than myself. The internet was down until 15 minutes ago.
Oh, I thought you were saying that your wife wasn't home.
I'm powerless over alcohol, and my wife is unmanageable.
That's a different program.
That's different. No, the internet was down, and the technician was here. He got here early this morning. It's been working and got it running 15 minutes before.
Man, I'm glad they got it running.
Sam, what's new with you?
My friend Boo.
Boo hoo.
Made you cry.
Well, they're tears of joy because guess what?
What?
The new grapevine's here! The new grapevine's here!
To open the new July 2024 issue, the editor writes, one of the most rewarding and important service positions an AA member can do is to carry the message of AA into prisons. Many institutions have meetings inside, but many do not. We get letters all the time from prisoners in need thanking us because Grapevine is often the only sober lifeline they have. This month, we feature stories of hope from members inside and outside the walls.
In the story, We Are Brothers, a group of guys are bonding, sponsoring each other, and sharing the love through the loneliness and fear of prison life.
In 164 pages of hope, a woman reads the big book with her cellmate for 3 years during COVID before meetings finally came back.
In Inside Job, a member dives into meditation and prayer. He writes, Step 11, which says, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. One word stood out to me in a way it never had before, sought. I looked it up. Sought means to hunt, pursue, or forage for something. I considered the way I had historically interacted with my higher power. Never had I hunted, pursued, or foraged for anything with God. My approach was always more passive, waiting for God to make his presence and intentions known to me. This one word changed my perception of Step 11. I love that.
That is some good stuff. He finds peace in prison and began helping others.
Uh-huh.
Also featured is a look at the National AA Corrections Conference by two hardworking AA Corrections volunteers. It's focused on the best practices in carrying the message of AA to alcoholics behind the walls. The first NCC, as it's called, was held in 2017.
And the next one will be in Charlotte, North Carolina, November 8th through 10th, 2024. Go to nationalcorrectionsconference.org to sign up.
That's all one word, nationalcorrectionsconference.org.
You said all one word, as one word.
Folks, if you can't go in person, we have plans to be there virtually and interview some of the guests.
You said some of the guests, as all one word.
Stop it. Folks, we got some interesting listener feedback, a bit of personal experience, some difficulty getting a visa or entry permit.
Wait a minute. A visa or entry permit? I thought you just needed a passport.
You do need a passport to travel internationally and such, but to get into Canada for the international conference next year, you also need permission from Canada to enter the country if you have a DUI on your record. So that's the thing. That's the entry permit, or also called a visa in some situations.
Okay, so we need both of those to get in if we have an offense on our driving record or something.
It's definitely worth checking out. If you think that you might have a problem getting in, I would suggest finding out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, okay. So we got this letter from an anonymous listener. It's entitled, Entering Canada with a DUI on My Record.
They write, I heard you guys talking about entering Canada. I have some experience with the process. At that time, it cost me $180, and it took about 9 months to receive my rehabilitation permit after submission. The application included references and a history of my alcohol journey. I shared my story and got some references from my sponsor and a couple of the more reputable members of my group. That's all it took.
Thanks, Anonymous. That's all it took. 9 months and references. He had to prove he was rehabilitated from the DUI on his record. Folks, if you're planning on traveling from elsewhere into Canada for the International Convention in Vancouver in 2025, here's more encouragement to apply for your passports and, if needed, rehabilitation permits now. This month. Hear that, Julie?
Who's Julie?
She's my delegate. And she just emphatically told the whole assembly to get your passports now. But then she shared she's been putting it off. So go ahead and apply.
You know, it's so easy to think, I'll just do that later. But as our listener wrote in to tell us, some of us may find the wreckage of our past showing up again.
That's right. Sam, who's our guest today?
Don, today's guest is Andrea N. from Lakewood, Colorado. Her story is on page 23 of the July 2024 issue. She's the author of Finally Free.
Finally Free. This is where I want to sing Free Bird.
But we don't have the rights.
No, we better not.
Attention long-term women. Grapevine is looking for stories by women serving long-term or life sentences. How are you staying sober inside? What are your challenges? What is AA like there? Send stories to aagrapevine.org/share or mail them to Grapevine, 475 Riverside Drive, 11th floor, New York, New York, 10115.
Hi, my name is Andrea N. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 7th, 2016. I am from Lakewood, Colorado. My home group is Daily Reprieve in Golden, Colorado, Area 10, District 33.
Whoa, you know your area and district. Andrea, what was going on with you when you first surrendered and came to AA internally?
Well, I was incarcerated at the time of the surrender. There were women that were bringing meetings into the jail, and a woman said, "You don't ever have to feel that way again." And that spoke to my heart. I was in trouble for multiple DUIs at that point in time. I was unemployable. I had ruined every relationship in my life. And, I couldn't get it. I'd heard of AA, but I didn't want to be in AA. And for something, some reason that day in that jail pod, that woman spoke to my heart.
So you said that you'd heard of AA, but you didn't want to be in AA. Now, absolutely, AA is the largest organization in the world, full of people who never wanted to join it. But
Right.
why didn't you want to be in AA?
I was in denial, I didn't want to be an alcoholic. And even though at that point, to me, just an alcoholic, just, a drunk, I didn't know what it meant to be an alcoholic. But whatever that was, I didn't want to be that. But deep down, there was always that, I'm a blackout drunk. So, it was a pretty good sense of you're an alcoholic, but I didn't want to necessarily be that.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I was so sensitive to it when I first came in the rooms. It just, I don't know, it's weird. It's weird to sit in a room full of alcoholics who identify as alcoholics and
Mhm.
say you're an alcoholic. It's scary, it's daunting. But
Mhm.
then, like, I was showing the world that I was an alcoholic when I was out drunk and falling and driving and da 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 da.
Right.
Yeah, a
So,
spectacle.
uh,
It's like I've spent my whole drinking career pretending like I'm not an alcoholic
Mhm.
and minimizing my drinking all the time. And then you walk into AA and everyone's just admitting it.
For me, it wasn't necessarily minimalizing it. It was, bringing light to it. Like, yeah, we all drink like you drink, maybe different versions, right? But so not necessarily minimalizing it, but being able to relate to it.
yeah.
Oh, you had 3 DUIs also, right?
You didn't minimize your drinking when you were drinking to yourself in your brain. Did you deny your drinking?
It was absolute denial. And but it was so obvious in every area of my life. I have 5 DUIs. My last DUI was a felony. I was on probation in 2 other counties from previous DUIs. So I mean, it was blatant, right? It was
Mm.
just blatant. And yes, I would minimize it, like, oh, that's okay. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to drink that much next time. And so it won't be as bad next time I get behind the wheel of a car, right? And so, yes, definitely minimizing it if that answers your question. Just total denial, that things were not that bad. And I was in so much trouble.
And then you sit in this room full of other women who are sharing similar experiences and relating.
I think it was, I don't want to say exciting, but it was like relieving. There was a huge
Yeah.
sense of relief, like, oh, someone drinks like I drink. When I heard a woman say that she blackout drank like I drank, I was like, wow, other women do this, and, somehow thinking I'm the only one. But it's such a huge sense of relief to know that, like, people are suffering from this disease and there's a solution. And that was just such a great relief in itself. So.
Yeah. I've never been in prison. Were you able to drink in prison?
No, you're not able to drink in prison. There's a lot of other things in prison that you can alter your mind from. I chose, not to take that avenue. I worked this program and I didn't actually go to prison. I was sentenced to 4 years of Department of Corrections. I
Hmm.
had been working the program from the day that I got to Arapahoe County Jail. By an act of God, I got accepted into a community corrections program. And so I never actually went to DOC.
Hmm.
But you could do a lot of things when you're incarcerated that you don't really think that you would be able to do. So I managed to stay clean and sober that whole time.
Were you going through withdrawals? Did that drive you towards going to a meeting and seeking help, or what?
I was not going through withdrawals, but I knew that I had a problem at that point in time. And so I sought out every single meeting was brought into the jails. I read my big book. I worked the steps to the best of my ability. I chased down those guards and I asked them to listen to my fifth step because I told them, if you don't listen to my fifth step, I'm going to come back here, man. And I don't want to come back here. And so
You
I was
gave your fifth
really,
step to a guard?
I did when I was
Interesting.
incarcerated.
How did that go? Did they know what you were doing?
They did well, and I sat down and explained to them. I said, "Hey, I'm an alcoholic, and I need to work these steps in order to stay sober and maintain sobriety. I don't know what I'm doing." I said, "But it says right here in the book that I need to share my fifth step with God and another person." I said, "Would you please be willing to listen to my fourth step?" And he said, he goes, "Well, I don't know what that means, Miss, but sure." And
Wow.
so he listened to my fifth step right there while I was incarcerated. The guards started to kind of have a little bit more respect for me because I think they saw that I'm trying to change. And it doesn't matter where you're at. You start changing where you're at, right?
Mhm.
Right where you're at. And it was difficult. I started seeing little changes within myself. Like I was starting to become a little more compassionate towards the women that were coming in and out, right? Um, you don't find compassion in jail. Let me tell you something. So
Okay.
I know that that was purely my higher power. And this thing started changing within me.
Now, while you were incarcerated, did you have contact with the outside AA community?
No, I did not. Only the women that came into that brought meetings into the jail.
How
Mhm.
often was that?
It was very sporadic. So in one county jail that I was in, it was every 2 weeks. It was like clockwork every 2 weeks. Well, I got transferred to another county jail where I had another conviction for a DUI, and it was very sporadic. Anytime they came, I was all over the meeting. I would read my big book, try to get other women that, I would speak to in the pod and stuff involved, like, hey, do you want to do some reading? There weren't too many women that were interested in it, so I read myself.
You were solo.
Yeah.
So you did all of this while you were incarcerated, but the date is approaching when you will be released. Did you have a plan?
Well, I didn't know that I was going to be released because I believed I was going to Department of Corrections. When they said that I got accepted into this other program, I was released the next day, and there was no plan. I was so grateful to just be able to smell the fresh air again. But I knew as soon as I got to the halfway house, a meeting was at hand. First, that was the first thing that I was going to do. Once I got clothes and got everything established, I was getting a pass to get to a meeting, and I made it to my original home group probably within 2 days of getting to the halfway house.
Did you have sponsorship while you were incarcerated?
No, I
Okay.
had no idea what I was doing. I was reading the book, and sometimes you need an interpreter for that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I was just reading the book, going by what it said. I was doing a lot of writing, a lot of journaling. I don't have my first fourth step, but I imagined it looked a little different than my fourth steps do
Certainly.
now.
You said that, sometimes you need an interpreter to help you figure out what this book says.
Mhm.
There's a plain language translation of the big book that's coming out this fall.
Yes.
Do you think that that's something that would be helpful for people who are behind the walls?
I do think it would be helpful because that's part of why we get a sponsor, right? Is to have someone help us understand, right? The disease of alcoholism, how to do an inventory, those sorts of things. And so I think that would be very beneficial. And certainly someone like me who is just going solo, you might just be able to understand it a little bit better.
Last question before you got out. Did you find that the work you were doing relieved the obsession to get out of yourself?
Absolutely. And I'm not sure that it's something that you can describe. Just having that obsession lifted. For me, it's like, when you're driving to the AA meeting and you're counting all the liquor stores on the way there, right? Because, but then one day you don't count the liquor
Mhm.
stores anymore.
Yeah.
Well, some people would call that a spiritual experience in looking back.
Yeah. I've had so many, so many.
Is there a particular one that pops to mind that you'd like to share?
So fast forward a little bit, I was on non-res. So I'd gone through the halfway house and I was able to get my own apartment. Um,
Did you call that non-reds?
so non-residential, you're not
Ah,
living in the halfway house, you're still being supervised by the state.
gotcha.
I applied for early termination for my case. I did all the things. I paid all my fines. And so I applied and I had got the letter
Hmm.
that said I was denied for early termination. Well, it was a big sink in my heart. My case manager also had got the letter. And she said, well, you need to come in so we can discuss this. And she was not a very pleasant person, really was not well versed in trying to see people be successful for whatever reason. And so I come in and I said, yeah, no, I applied for early termination. And she goes, well, you didn't get it. And I said, well, I'm already free. And she looked at me with just this blank stare. And I knew that was a God shot right there because I really wanted to tell her a whole lot of different things because she couldn't wait to tell me that I got denied, and I just wanted to like give it to her, like, I know.
Mhm.
And I just want to be ugly and be mean because I was hurt, right? And instead, I told her, I'm already free.
Hmm.
Those words came out of my mouth. I know that was a spiritual experience.
That is not fighting.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Andrea, what's going on? How do you stay sober today?
So today I continue to go to meetings. My favorite meeting is a Friday night beginners meeting. I love to see the newcomers. I currently sponsor 3 women. I also bring meetings into the jail where I heard the message.
Oh,
That's probably one of the biggest honors for me, was to get accepted and to carry the message. It's an underserved population. It's where I heard the message, and it's where my passion is 100%.
mm,
Early on, I had, sponsors that were in the program for a long time. I sought people that had what I wanted. When I get asked to speak, I say yes. When I get asked to sponsor, I say yes. When I get asked to do service work, I say yes. So I got in the boat, I stayed in the boat, and for me, service is one of the biggest parts of my sobriety today.
do you have sponsees?
I do have sponsees.
How do you sponsor?
Well, I've been told I'm kind of hard as a sponsor. I don't take any BS. And I think that's because I had amazing sponsors that took me through the steps, how the book says to do it. And that's how I take my sponsees through the steps as well. Sometimes people don't like to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't want to, they don't want to see where they might be holding back just a little bit, right?
Mm.
And so I like to bring awareness to that because I ask them, how free do you want to be? You can keep that little tidbit for
Yeah.
yourself if you want, or you can let the light into it and you can be free.
Is holding on to that really worth it?
And I love it
Wow.
because I feel the freedom and the liberation, in my heart from this program. This program saved my life.
When you say you take your sponsees through the book, so do you work the steps when you come to them in reading the big book, or do you take them through the 12 and 12? I'm just curious. I hear people sponsoring entirely differently, and I have been taught to do it 2 different ways. And one is when you get to the step reading the big book, then you do it, which takes months to
Mhm.
get to the steps. And so now I feel like I would like somebody to get into the steps kind of the way that at least it's described that Dr. Bob and Bill did it in the early days immediately.
I like them doing it immediately. However, that's not how I do it. I do read the first 164 pages and then we go through the steps, but we also read the 12 and 12 as we're working that step.
Mm-hmm.
So with my sponsees, when they're on, step 5, we're reading the 12 and 12 along with their step 5, just because it gives a more in-depth, description of what these steps actually are and what it actually means. And I want them to understand.
Mhm.
I'm not, I can tell you do this and this is why to do it or whatever, but I want you to have a good, firm understanding of what this step actually means. I love sponsoring and it keeps me sober. So
The reason you're here with us today is because you have a story that got published in the July 2024 issue of the Grapevine. How hard was it to do that?
I've been pondering submitting my story to the Grapevine for a very long time. And I said, I don't really have anything to share like that's valuable. My sponsor had said to me, do you know how selfish that comment is? So then I started
So you
crying,
got a you
of
got a
course.
tough sponsor. I see where you get it.
And then, of course, he had me crying more times than not, because he used to ask me, why aren't you sharing at meetings? And I would say, I don't have anything to contribute. And he would say, that's incredibly selfish, Andrea. He also taught me when I'm speaking at meetings to share from my heart. He said, it doesn't matter what other people think. Someone out there needs to hear what you have to say. You have a message. So it took me a very long time to muster up the courage to share my story with the Grapevine, and it was not without much help. I did have a dear friend that helped me write my story. She didn't really need to do anything but do some proofreading for it. And so that was kind of a miracle in itself.
You don't really need to proofread it because the Grapevine has proofreaders that'll edit everything anyway. You don't have to worry about spelling or anything like that. But
I've heard people describe that this is akin to doing the fourth step, that what you need to do, the biggest obstacle is picking up the pen and paper or however you're going to record this and sitting down and doing it.
starting.
Starting, absolutely. And that's the woman that helped me. She said, I recommend that you get in a quiet place. She said, say a little prayer or a little meditation and just start writing whatever comes. Don't worry about the punctuation. Don't worry about the wording. Don't worry about anything. And she said, just start writing. And it is very similar to a fourth step, right? Like when you just start writing what's coming, you allow it to come. And I feel like when you're just really open to receive and you're in alignment, what needs to come out will come.
Beautifully
That's
put.
great. Well, Andrea, I know you've got a lot of sponsees, so we want you to stick around because we got a question for the newcomer. We want to give a shout out to Steve W., who provided the little musical bumper for our new A Newcomer Asks segment.
In this segment of A Newcomer Asks, we have a question from Jörg in Switzerland. I hope that I'm pronouncing your name well. He poses a question he has been asked. Why do you call yourself an alcoholic if you don't drink anymore for so many years? What a good question.
Ooh.
I think that this kind of comes back full circle to the beginning of our conversation with you, Andrea. I remember you saying, I don't want to be an alcoholic, and all these other people in the room who were identifying themselves as alcoholics.
Yes. The last thing I wanted to be was an alcoholic. I would never call myself an alcoholic. I call myself tipsy.
I'm going to call you tipsy from now on.
Yeah. But I just wouldn't do it because alcoholic had a bad term. And the fact that every day I say out loud, I am an alcoholic, is ongoing settling into myself that this is the way my brain operates. I have an alcoholic brain and it's trying to kill me. There's no denying it. So I'm going to totally accept it. And to continuously say that I am an alcoholic, that is the point that all the growth of my whole life comes from. That's when everything changed for me. For me, the reason to continually say it is to have the acceptance that that's the way that my brain operates, and I don't want to be that person anymore.
Andrea, I assume that you probably introduce yourself as an alcoholic when you're in meetings.
I do. I do.
Why do you still identify as an alcoholic?
I think really just to piggyback off of what Don said, because to accept that I'm an alcoholic is to take that first step. I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. And then I can do something about that, right? I can invite my higher power in. I can work the 12 steps of the program. I can do all of the things in order to keep that alcoholic in check, right? Because otherwise, I'm self-will run riot. So I say I'm a grateful alcoholic, and people are like, why are you grateful? Because if I never came to the conclusion that I'm an alcoholic, I would have never found recovery. And I would never live this beautiful life that I get to live today.
And I think that in addition to the things that you've described, both of you, saying I'm an alcoholic one-on-one or in a group setting is a great equalizer. Every single one of us in that room is an alcoholic, regardless of position in life. And we all have this thing in common. And because of that, I can understand you. You can understand me. We know each other before we've even met.
We're talking about changing the language at the opening of our meeting to address the singleness of purpose. One of the things we're kicking around is to say, we all are many things besides an alcoholic. We have a lot of other addictions, but in this meeting, we focus on this part of who we are. We are alcoholics, which is to say everybody's welcome, but we focus on alcoholism.
I think that's an inspired way of addressing that.
I like it. I don't know if it's going to go through, but we'll see.
I like it too. And it's also very inclusive.
Exactly.
Because so many people hear this focus on alcoholism. Yeah, but I'm an addict. Yeah, but I've got these other problems that are, right. When I focused on my alcoholism, when I worked the steps on that problem, all the other problems became clear what to do.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well.
And I needed to go to Alcoholics Anonymous because that's where I heard people who had the same experiences that I had. I don't have experience using drugs in the way that I've heard shared in some meetings in other fellowships as well. And so I needed to come to Alcoholics Anonymous to hear my experience. And one of the things that I love is I heard from a friend many years ago, I can go to any anonymous meeting that exists now, and I can get strength and hope. But I needed to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I still do, to hear my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Andrea, this has been an experience talking to you.
Indeed. Andrea, I hope we haven't left you too scarred. I know Don can be rather jarring.
Oh, it takes a lot worse than that.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
The Grapevine strives to be self-supporting.
Please subscribe to the magazine or app and visit the Grapevine online store.
The app is free in your phone's app store and has great content and features provided at no cost to you.
But if you subscribe, you get so much more. And you support all things Grapevine, including this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Only $2.99 a month.
I'm at the very wit's end. Cuckoo.
A priest, a pastor, and a rabbit walk into a bar.
What will you have, Father?
I'll have a draft beer, thank you very much.
What about you, Pastor?
Well, I suppose I'll have the same.
And what for you, Rabbit?
I have no idea. I'm only here because of autocorrect.
It's really not that funny. Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. Podcast info, including how to call in, is at aagrapevine.org/podcast. Search AA Grapevine in the App Store on your phone or find AA Grapevine on Instagram and YouTube. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org. If you want to know more about AA, search online for Alcoholics Anonymous in your city or visit aa.org.
That was freaking amazing.